everybody.
Oh, so good to be back.
Oh my goodness. So back by popular demand, I have the famous, infamous Allison.
Wow. Thank you. Glad to be back.
So today, like I said, these are great ed chats that we came up with, but this is a great time to talk about mental health. And I think last week, Allison, well, I want to say 3 weeks ago, right? Allison really impressed us with some strategies that we can use. And so we brought her back. You guys requested her. So welcome, Allison.
Thank you. I'm glad to be back. I think right now, I couldn't think of a more timely week to talk about mental health, especially closing out 2020, and also it's World Kindness Week. So, a lot of great things aligned to talk about mental health this week. I think.
No, I totally agree. Jen is saying, hi, how are you doing, Jean? Good to see you.
Welcome. Yeah, I think. So I think one thing, especially in terms of mental health in the classroom, that I think gets very overlooked that I do want to talk about tonight is the impact of just teachers on mental health. I think that there's a lot of conversation about, we have to be supporting students. There needs to be this holistic support. But we don't talk a lot about what can we do to create a classroom culture that helps students support themselves. Because we talk about mental health as mental illness. We conflate the two a lot, right? We say, mental health is important. There needs to be counselors. And we automatically assume all mental health is negative mental health. And that's not true. Everyone has mental health. Yes. Everyone, Yes. So teachers have a very critical role in the classroom, not only supporting students that have mental illness, but just supporting overall mental health, which is different from mental illness. And I think, at the outset, want to address mental health and mental illness, interlinked, not the same thing.
No, I totally agree. And I even see that the resources in the class, so the resources that teachers have for their mental health is limited. But I see now that the teachers are going to the counselors that are in the school because there are times that they need to just breathe and just get it out. And so I feel like that the counselor now is overwhelmed because not only is the counselor servicing the teacher, but also the students, which is actually her job. So I worry about all the pieces in the school and everybody.
Absolutely. No, it's definitely a difficult situation all around right now. But there are I hesitate to say simple, but there are steps that we can take as educators to make sure that, either, especially right now when in virtual learning, that students and teachers, hello, Abrar, that students and teachers know, where to go and what to do. So actually, Abrar, I'll start with your question. Go over some examples on the distinction between mental health and mental illness. Yes, I can. Mental illness is diagnosable. It is diagnosed by psychologists, psychiatrists. It's what we think. When I say mental health, a lot of people think depression. A lot of people think anxiety. And these are things that are increasing in students and teachers right now. There are higher rates of depression and anxiety. So when I say mental illness, that's what I mean. I'm talking about the diagnosable increase and just general existence of depression, anxiety, and other mental illnesses in students and teachers alike. Mental health I look at mental health like a bucket. Everyone's mental health is a bucket. And there are buckets, you have your life, you have your family bucket, your, friends bucket, all that. But your mental health is a bucket. And when it runs low, that's when we get to burnout. So when we talk on say LinkedIn about I'm feeling really burned out, it's because we're not taking care of our mental health. Yeah. So everyone has mental health. We all can experience burnout, but we also, on the flip side for mental health, we can experience great joy, feeling rest. Maybe you're on a vacation and, you're out you're on an island, sunbathing, having a great time. you still have mental health. Your mental health is good, I'm assuming. Maybe, it sounds like a great time to me.
Yeah.
But that's the
No, I totally agree, because there are times that I have to go away into the closet upstairs and play soft music, the ocean waves, because I need that to function and be okay. So yes, I'm right with you.
Everybody needs to take care of their mental health. Not everyone has mental illness. So that is the distinction. But again, in the classroom, a ton of things that we can do for our mental health. One of them, and I'll keep driving the point home. Ask your students how they're doing and get to know every single one of your students. So it doesn't just have to look like, hi, Cassandra, how are you doing today? It can also look like, this is an activity that we are going to do. It's like a get to know you activity. Write a haiku about yourself. Submit it to me. We have to make sure that students who might not feel as comfortable telling the whole class how they are in a Zoom are also engaging with us. So classroom assignments, asking how students are doing at the beginning and end of class, even in the middle, being like, hey, like how are we doing on this assignment? Like, how do you feel about this?
I love it. These are great ideas, especially when we're collaborating on Zoom and online. How do we engage students? And I think one way, continuously have a little 3-minute game at the beginning, middle, or end. Find something that's engaging. And I always say, whoever's doing the most talking is doing the most learning. So how do we mark students and call on students and get them excited to share ideas? So yes, I love it.
Absolutely. Here, what are some skills we can use with our students to talk about mental health? I love this question. And I think that like all skills, I think mental health, it depends on the age of the student. I personally love red light, yellow light, green light for younger students, where it's like right now, I'm at a green light, I'm feeling really great. And maybe they'll start feeling a little anxious. It's like, oh, I feel like I'm coming up on a yellow light, So teaching, and a red light is like full stop. Like, I can't right now, learning is not happening for me. I am panicking. Maybe I need to go to the nurse. I need a lot of support. We like full stop, So green light, yellow light, red light. I love that one for very younger kids who, it might be harder to, explain the more nuanced need of like, oh, I have to take a break for myself. A first grader isn't going to say those words, but they will say, I'm at a red light.
No, that is great, because I've even seen like, hey, what's your Zoom background? Find a Zoom background on how you're feeling right now. And boy, these students are very creative, and that's for upper grades, but it's a great way to actually identify. And if something comes up that you don't understand, that's when you can ask students to clarify. So yeah.
Absolutely. Another skill that we can use to talk about mental health. I know, Christine, I remember you're a music educator. Asking a student to show up with, a song that right now represented their week would be a great, and then talk about, it sounds like maybe you're stressed. If that was a really happy, or maybe that was a really happy song. Using the inside out characters would work too.
I love that idea. Christine, that is amazing. That is a great idea.
Absolutely. So those are some tangible skills. Another, when we're working in larger groups as well, here, I'm going to drop this link to, I was reading an article a couple of weeks ago that I liked a lot by an educator. And one thing because beyond getting to know our students, we want students to feel a sense of purpose, a sense of being a stakeholder in their education. And so one way to improve mental health, to improve that sense of, like, I matter, what I do is, helpful, and also, I am valuable, is to find unique classroom jobs for all of your students. And what I mean by that is, you'll have your student that's always raising their hand. They like to dialogue. And then you'll have students, maybe they don't like that as much, but they might be like a real tech wizard. They might be really good at technology. So finding something that they can do in the realm of technology for your classroom would be a great way to incorporate them. I mean, you also have you can have a classroom DJ where maybe you can switch this up. Like a student gets to choose from a list of songs, like this is the song we're going to play while we work today, So finding purposeful but useful jobs that are unique, that play to children's strengths in the classroom will help you get to know them, and also help increase that sense of purpose, help increase that sense of self-efficacy and self-worth that is so intrinsically tied to mental health.
Yeah. And so I even remember in older grades that, finding a space for them to be the lead teacher, right? If there's something that students need help with or support, the lead teacher or that role, so students can show other students if they know the skill or activity or they need help. So yeah, being very creative of finding ways for students to be leaders within the classroom or the Zoom room.
Absolutely. And then you can even have for older grades, a chat moderator. Maybe there's a student that doesn't necessarily want to continually speak all the time, but maybe they would be interested in moderating. Which is also, it's just, there are tons of ways to get students interacting with you that aren't, let's have a discussion. Not that having a discussion is bad, it's just it plays on the same set of students every time. I can remember, I love to talk. So I was that student that was, I was that student that was raising my hand all the time in the discussions. But, you also have students that they like to write. They don't want to talk. They like to gather their thoughts. And both are very valid, but equally important ways to help you get to know your students. And so that is very, very tied to mental health. If a student is having a difficult time expressing themselves in your classroom, it's going to be hard for you to get to know them. It's going to be hard for them, and getting to know relationships are at the core of building a strong culture of mental health in the classroom. Yeah. So
Yeah.
Thank you for pointing that out.
Sorry about that. But yeah, relationships. Oh my goodness. So I guess thinking about how can we do things differently next semester too. How do we pre-call students and say, it's a pleasure to have you in the class. I cannot wait. And then letting parents know, because even they are going through a lot of pressure and, stress. So just being proactive and just doing things differently, from dances in the classroom, having a dance off, student creating their, individual talent or skill, leaving time in the classroom for those little things that, really make students feel comfortable and welcome in the classroom.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. While we're also on the subject of parents, I can't remember if we brought this up in past lives, Cassandra, but especially when we're talking about mental health, parents are they're on your side regardless. They're the parents of your students. But especially when it comes to mental health, the more the more that you can get to know your child's parents, the better. I've heard of teachers set up 45-minute, no commitment a week Zoom sessions with parents. It's just one session a week for 45 minutes. And if parents show up, they show up. And they can talk about whatever it is. Maybe, the child had a bad week and the parent wanted to, communicate that to the teacher. Or, maybe looking at the weeks ahead, I want to give you a heads up, X, Y, Z. I want to make sure that we're both looking out for, this child in this classroom. So creating that doorway, creating that line of communication with your parents is really, really critical. Because, the more that you know about your students, the better you can support their mental health. And, also support parents. Students are spending so much time at home right now.
Yes.
So making sure that, and it's hard because there's the line between home life and school. But right now that line is very blurred for students.
Yes.
And it's also very blurred for teachers. So the more that we can do to support parents and teachers, the more that we can get an insight into what's happening at home, the better that we can support.
And I agree. And I kind of think that the lost art that I see in virtual is marking student success. And I see that dropping off the map because I don't see that as often as we do face to face. And that's what our students miss, being recognized or celebrated for, doing well on an assignment or even turning it in or showing up for so many times. And, what is the celebration that we do in the classroom? And how can we continue to bring that in an online environment? So,
celebrating little joys in the classroom will improve mental health. It does. There's research that shows when we express gratitude, when we express kindness, when we express joy, that affects the outlook. It affects the outlook of students. It affects the outlook of teachers when we celebrate those little. So, I actually have a professor right now in my master's program, which is actually very rare that they do this. But every time that students improve in terms of like the average of the paper, the teacher hosts a Zoom party. So even at this level, it's great, even at the higher education level, celebrating the smaller joys, especially right now, like that's my favorite class. It's the class that I know students the most in. And it's because, we've opened it up to be, oh, well, let's celebrate, let's get to know each other rather than here's the paper. Thank you.
Yes.
Yeah.
That seems like such a safe space. Yeah. I would definitely want to be a part of that space. And I'm pretty sure most of the people in your group or your colleagues are like, yes, this is where it's at. So yeah.
Yeah. We're very lucky.
That is fun. How fun. I even want to talk about kind of how mental health, what supports do you have and how are we connecting our families and students to those supports? Are we walking them there? Are they a part of our school? And many times they're not. They're existential, hey, I'm gonna send you to such and such, go call, and then there's no follow through. So how do we get them included in the school as a part of the cloth so we can offer more supports to more people?
So I think that's a really great question. And I think that's a question that a lot of districts are asking themselves as well. I think it's the Los Angeles Unified School District that actually just implemented a mental health hotline. They have 2 or 3 full-time staff members that you can call in at any time. Parents have called, like they've had 5th graders call in, they've had teachers call in, all for very different reasons. But they're a part of that community. Versus, I've seen a lot of schools as well. They'll refer students to an outside telehealth provider or an outside, and I think, and this is an editorial opinion, but I think we really need to bolster community mental health measures. We really need to bolster community mental illness measures. Like we need to look out for one another rather than outsourcing that problem, which is why it's so important to create a culture of positive mental health in the classroom. Because, and I'll also say this, when we create a positive mental health atmosphere in the classroom, it opens the classroom up for those negative emotions as well. It creates that vulnerability and that space for students to say, I'm not having that great a day right now. I'm feeling exhausted. I'm feeling burned out. And this also applies to the workplace, I will say. When we create a positive mental health atmosphere, it creates a good atmosphere for people to show up as their authentic selves. Mm-hmm. So, it's very, very important.
Yeah, we had a great question. What effect do you think virtual learning has had on students' mental health? I can see both pros and cons.
So actually, I've heard a lot of different thoughts on this. Generally, I think the narrative is, and I think it is true that students are struggling. There's compounded with, especially in upper grades, the loss of a lot of social-cultural phenomena like prom, like sports, things that, students might even be anxious about college prep for. Like, I don't have this on my resume now. Are people going to accept me? You have the social isolation. You have just the complete and utter dependency on technology. They're staring at screens for at least 6 hours a day, and then they have to do homework. And so I think right now a lot of students are feeling isolation. I also, however, have heard on the flip side that there are students who are really thriving in this environment. Students, they exist. Students who are really enjoying the fact that some of their classes are kind of, they're a lot more flexible. So they can do work, they can self-delegate when they want to do work, and they meet their deadlines and they like it. But I think overall right now, virtual learning, and I think we should explore what virtual learning options could look like for students that do thrive in this environment. But I think right now it's important to talk about virtual learning in the context of crisis, because that's what we're in. This type of virtual learning isn't online learning per se. It's virtual learning in a crisis. And so I think that is reflected in a lot of the mental health of students today. I don't know, Cassandra, if you have thoughts as well.
Oh my gosh, I totally agree. And I even see, access as being a part of the problem. Who has access and who doesn't, right? And the gap, what does that mean for, people who don't have access to technology? And is this a gap year? That's another thing I worry about. And because the people who maybe are thriving are a little more affluent than those who, don't have access to internet, to computers at home. And so I just worry about that piece of it. And so what equity really comes into play when we think about access. So
absolutely.
We have another question. So how do we identify students who are struggling emotionally?
This is a really great question. And I think this is what gets at the heart, I think, of a lot of conversations in mental health for teachers generally. I would say, especially right now, it's incredibly difficult. A lot of times when you had students that seemed lethargic in class, or, they're showing up late, and some of these things, they still apply, but it's a lot easier to tell in person. So the virtual aspect makes it difficult, but I think a lot of it still applies. If your student is showing up late, if they're not engaging in any way, shape, or form, even if you have multiple avenues, if they're submitting homework late, maybe even like a dead giveaway. If a parent says, my child, if in your 45-minute once a week meeting, a parent shows up and says, my child seems to be really struggling right now. I'm wondering if you've noticed the same thing, that as well. There's actually a lot of really great, there's another resource that I'm going to put out there to the world, which is the Child Mind Institute, which goes into as well, like how students experience trauma, how students experience mental illness, and also mental health just generally. So here I will put that there, but it's a really great resource for educators who are looking to bolster their ability to identify and support students that are struggling.
Yeah.
I'll also mention that making sure, especially right now, that students know the avenues they can take in order to support themselves is critical. Especially with virtual learning, like your student might not know where to go. So having even a worksheet where it's like, this is the email of the counselor at our school, or these are some resources that parents and students can go to, like the Child Mind Institute, to, support themselves. Just giving them that knowledge also sets them up for success.
True.
In order to, if they start struggling.
And also like virtual check-ins. How often are you checking in with your class? And sometimes doing a quick survey and then putting the survey out and say, hey, we got this many students who, today is not a good day, and that's okay. As well as having class discussions about emotions and what we are all facing. I think vulnerability is very hard for our teachers, but we have to go into those spaces.
Absolutely. And it can be very jarring, I think, for a lot of teachers, especially, where teaching can be such a, rote memorization. You need to learn this, there's test prep this, and we have a ton of things to get through that. it can be kind of jarring to pause and say, how are we all feeling right now? Especially if that's not something that we are doing for ourselves. If we don't pause with ourselves, it will be that much weirder for us to pause in a room full of like 20 something odd students. So it's so critical. It's critical to talk about and name emotions. And even for younger grades, introducing like, I feel lonely. What does lonely mean? Let's learn about loneliness. Or, introducing that vocabulary, because being able to name the emotion is half the battle. Naming the emotion takes away the power of the emotion. So helping your students name emotions in any assignments, always a good bet.
I appreciate that. And, I keep saying how doodling and drawing, because we're online, because we're virtual, how can we express our feelings other than turning in the submission or like typing, but drawing, creating something, and then either taking a picture and uploading it. But I think, I don't want to say it's a lost art, but I see it disappearing once we went online. And how can our students effectively create something and share it with the group? So
yeah, absolutely. Our art is a great tool for self-expression. Even if you don't think you're a good artist, art is meant for art's sake.
Mm-hmm.
It's not about being good, it's about expression.
Yes.
So
I totally agree. And so we have one more question, and then we'll wrap it up from Christina.
Headspace for educators. One of my favorite places to go for self-care. I'm not sure if you're familiar with Headspace. It's a meditation app. I feel like people, it's generally known, but it is fantastic. They also have packs for children and students. I love Headspace for educators. Also, another self-care tip for teachers, I think right now that is very overlooked: budget your time. If it's 8 p.m. and you're burnt out and you're still grading papers, you're not doing anyone a favor by continually grading papers while you're falling asleep on the paper. Just stop. Just take a break. Take breaks. Make sure that you are budgeting out time for yourself and no one else. Take breaks.
Yes. And, sometimes you find things that you love and do it with the class. Or share this opportunity, like planting, gardening, and tell students how you feel when you're in this space, how it makes you feel. But I say, find something you love and do it. Where's your happy space? Maybe it's in the car, turning music up really loud, singing your favorite song, whatever it is. You need to allocate and put time on your schedule for you.
Absolutely. And that's the best form of self-care. It's, a tried and true method.
So, like I said, we love Allison. Oh my goodness. Back by popular demand. And so we appreciate you, Allison. If you have anything else to add at the end?
Honestly, I'm just here. Oh, I'm glad. Yes, please check it out. Yes, we do. We need to teach our inner student. Oh, I love that phrase.
I love that.
So I'm around. Make sure we're supporting our own mental health. Drink water, look at some greenery, engage in some art. These are not frivolous endeavors. They might not amount to productivity per se, especially, for teaching, but take care of yourselves and take care of your students.
I totally agree. And I think, as a bonus for everybody who chimed in today, I think I'm going to give them a free ticket to the coach off. So the coaching hot seat. So congratulations, everybody who came. I will be emailing you tickets to our coach off session. I hope you enjoy that. But thank you, Allison, again for coming. I appreciate your time.
Happy to be here. Always happy.
All right, everybody. Bye.
Bye, everyone.